not going to be a blockbuster. But it was a pretty good one. And in a era, even at the beginning of the MCU or pre-MCU, it probably would have been considered one of the best comic book movies. The only difference is times change. Welcome to the heart of the stories we tell. My name is Rob, and tonight I will be reviewing Venom, a movie by Sony. And let me just start off by saying, if you know nothing about the character of Venom, this movie does everything you need to introduce you to the concept, even if they totally change the origin. Taken away is the Secret Wars, the alien device, the connection to Spider-Man, and at first you think, well, that's kinda everything, right? But not really. Venom's about so much more than that. The idea of the bonding of two individuals, the idea of the power and the possible corruption, the idea of a madness that seeps in from the outside, the idea of a lethal protector, someone that says pretty much F this, the idea of someone who just has had enough. And yeah, we've had our bad experiences with Venom in the theater already, and I hope it doesn't get compared to that. I see it much more like the animated series Venom, and I think that's a good thing. Overall, I'm going to give this movie a silver rating. It's good, it's not great, but it's really fun. In fact, there are some surprising funny moments in it. But okay, before we get too far, what I do here is I review stories, I come up with theories on how and why we tell stories, and I give you reviews like this. If that sounds interesting, click subscribe. This isn't so much a hero's journey as it's a villain or an anti-hero's journey. But it's very much rags to riches, man in a hole? Yeah, man in a hole. And Tom Hardy does an amazing job of acting, which I think we already knew he would. I'll be honest, the script has some flaws, especially in the rushedness. This could easily have been 2 movies, an origin and a first adventure, but of course you don't have time for that, especially in this day and age. All of the actors also did a good job of portraying the fact that they were in a serious situation even when things were outrageous and ridiculous. And I give them credit. Grace Randolph said something about this being Army of Darkness meets Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And I kind of agree. I feel a lot of 80s and 90s nostalgia here. When they first started talking about this movie, they were talking about merging the origin story with Secret Agent Venom along with the Lethal Protector story. And I can see where the person who sat down to write this and the people who sat down to edit this definitely used each of those for inspiration. But I guess I've said as much as I can without throwing this up there and going, it's time to stop. Spoiler time. So, like I said in the non-spoiler section, there were some great scenes. But you know what? It was actually pretty amazing? The little humorous scenes. Like, this is a movie about psychopathic killer aliens. This could have been pure horror. But they managed to make it just enough comedy. Even if I don't think they always hit it exactly right when they did it. But let's break down those elements of fiction, and we start with the setting. And the setting is, well, that's a little confusing. Is this in the MCU? Well, sort of. It's tangentially. No, not like that. It's connected to the Spider-Verse, and that's where it gets interesting. Although Sony is also creating things that don't directly have to do with the Spider-Verse. I will say it probably takes place close to the MCU. Feels like the Life Foundation actually recreated Tony Stark's house after it was demolished. And it obviously takes place in San Fran. But with that, let's move on to the characters. And the characters are pretty obvious. We have Venom, we have Eddie Brock, we have his ex-girlfriend, and we have her new love interest. Other than that, we just have a handful of pretty throwaway characters. And normally that's a bad thing, but not really in this case. They really do a great job of showcasing the actors they have. The villain they have doesn't need to be a lot of in-your-face villainy. And the supporting cast does a lot just in the backgrounds. And I have to say, for a movie that is primarily about Venom, She-Venom was pretty amazing. And at the end, fighting like a girl definitely saved the day. I don't mind that either. But let's talk about the plot. Alright, so the plot's pretty straightforward. There's an alien invasion coming, only it's coming from within. See, this bad guy has figured out that there are symbiotes up in space, and he's willing to grab them and try to bond them to people because he thinks that's the next phase of human evolution. But one of them, who ends up being a loser, ends up bonding with someone who's lost everything here on Earth, and as such, has created a new person, Venom. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. No one wrote a classic piece of literature here. This is a pretty straight up comic book movie, and a comic book origin movie at that, one we've seen 100 times before. But when we get to theme and symbolism, but let's start with point of view first. So we really have 3 point of view characters, but the main one is Eddie Brock. And Eddie Brock just, well, we have to be introduced to him quickly at the height of his life so that we could take it all away and then have him rebuild. We also then have Riot, and we have the person Riot's eventually going to bond with. But at the end of the day, it mostly is Eddie. And remember how I said that there was humor in this? You could write an entire buddy cop movie about the way Venom interacts with himself. In fact, pretty much right at the end, when the symbiote has decided to help Eddie reconnect with the love of his life, it is hysterical. I mean, it literally made me and my girlfriend laugh out loud. And I mean, we cheered and we cried and we laughed, but laughing was not expected. But I want to talk about theme for a second. Remember a few minutes ago when I said 2 become 1? Well, that's part of this. Eddie is a broken person, and he is in most incarnations. But in this, Venom is a broken symbiote as well. They even describe themselves as losers. And they have to kind of work together, figure out how to work together. And it's rather interesting, especially with the fact that Eddie has to choose to take the suit back. Eddie has to give up a bit of himself in order to become what it is that needs to be done. And yeah, that's very different than the origin of the comic, but it's not that different from the way the comic worked in the end. But let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good right off the bat is fantastic acting. Everyone is going all out here. Great scenery. Pretty good special effects. Not the best. But I think the absolute best part is the black comedy. The little tiny bits, like when he scares his neighbor who plays music too loud, and the Venom features start to come out. Little touches like that. But what about the bad? The bad is a little weird, because it's twofold, and it's opposite. They don't spend enough time introducing non-symbiote villains, and there aren't enough symbiotes. I know what you're saying, you can't do both, but either one. We have, in Lethal Protector, the Guardsman, we could have had supervillain tech people, but they didn't go that route. Instead, they just used these weird drone things and regular guns. Then, we have an entire set of 5 symbiotes they could have used, one of which is a personal favorite, because she was psycho. One of the things that she even says is, but the voice was always talking to me, even before they gave me the symbiote. And it looked like they were going that route at the beginning. I don't understand why I mean, at the end, we finally have a big fight with Riot that, you know what, we'll get to that in a second. The ugly, and anyone who's trying to say comic book movies are overdone are going to point this out. Hey, look at that, our final fight scene was 2 people with the exact same powers, and they were battling each other in quick succession, really fast, destroying property, and you almost couldn't follow it with your eye, and they just basically are Venom vs. Venom. Yay. Now I'm going to defend this. It was pretty good. And yeah, I understand they had budget constraints, but it's why it gets a silver rating. I still loved it. And there's a last bit I need to add in, and that was the end credit scene, which there's only one of, even though people keep saying it's 2. Celtic Cassidy, Woody Harrelson, Carnage. Now, Eddie, as a reporter, gets an invite to be able to talk to Cassidy in prison. He basically threatens he's going to get out someday, and then there will be carnage. It's a nice little play, and I really hope, for this and other reasons, that there are sequels to this. But before we talk about direct sequels, There was supposed to be a Silver and Black project in the works that I guess has somewhat fallen through. But the next one they're talking about is Michael Morbius, another Spider-Man character that doesn't directly need Spider-Man for his origin and can be worked into a larger setting. And I'd like to point out worked with Black Cat in the animated series, so we could still use that. But also, interestingly enough, worked with a group called the Midnight Suns, and we currently have Ghost Rider on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the second to last season, and there's talk about bringing Blade back in. I'm just saying. My picture perfect thing would be for them to make both those movies and get some MCU support, get Midnight Suns and then Maximum Carnage all up and running, tie it all in with Spider-Man, but that's probably a pipe dream. For now, I'm curious what you thought of Venom. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a blockbuster, but I think it's fun. And I think it deserves a good rating and a good sequel. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Especially let me know what you disliked about it. And of course, we've reached the point where every YouTuber asks you to do the same thing. Hit the thumbs up button, share, subscribe, help this channel grow. But I'm going to throw in another one. Down below is a link to my Patreon. I'm trying to get that boosted up. In my first video of October is going to have a link to a special subsection there. And of course, a big thank you to anyone who has supported already. Even if you can't, though, join our community by just talking. Leave me a message. Let me know what you thought. As we walk through the heart of all the stories we tell, by walking through the heart of Venom. Have a good night, and thanks for watching.